Hello, I'm Giles Darling and I write novels, plays and non-fiction books. In this video I show an example of how to create dozens of story ideas from a what-if moment. This follows the process outlined in my How to Create Story Ideas videos, which I include a link to below. The what-if moment that prompted this video was recent political upheaval here in the UK, including 2 changes of Prime Minister. Who knows what more might change by the time you watch this video? Voting reform, or wider electoral reform, has always lurked in the background of UK politics. There was even a referendum about it in 2011. Depending on the result of the next general election, which could occur at any moment, voting reform could once again be high up on the political agenda. So I thought to myself, what if there's another referendum? What if voting reform actually happens? This could lead to many interesting story ideas. The initial steps to create story ideas from a what-if moment are to ask open-ended questions and to come up with some initial answers along with follow-on questions. So let's get started. Question 1. What is the type of voting reform? There are many types of voting that the story idea could be based on. For example, the UK currently has a mix of systems. Members of the UK Parliament based in London are elected using first past the post, also known as FPTP. Members of the regional assemblies and parliaments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and also in London, are elected using a combination of FPTP and proportional representation, also known as PR. There are lots of different types of PR. People in favour of voting reform in the UK typically want to replace FPTP with PR. Therefore, if you base a story idea around FPTP or PR, it is less likely to be unique, because there are already many books, websites and online videos about these 2 voting systems. Story ideas focusing on other types of voting could stand out more, for example a 2-round runoff voting system as used in France to elect its president. However, that system is also widely used and well documented. Therefore, for this series of videos, I'm going to base my story ideas on a relatively unknown voting system because this could help make my story ideas even more unique. I don't know where I first learnt about first and second past the post, also known as FasPTP or sometimes FSPTP. Indeed, searching for it on the internet doesn't yield any matching results. I don't even know where it's used, if at all. However, it combines the simplicity of FPTP and the increased voter representation offered by PR. It could also form part of wider electoral reform here in the UK by replacing the House of Lords with an elected second chamber, which many people also want. How FasPTP works is simple. At a general election, voters select a single candidate for their constituency in exactly the same way as under the present FPTP system. Also, just like the current system, the candidate with the most votes becomes that constituency's Member of Parliament, or MP, in the primary chamber. In the UK, the House of Commons is currently that primary chamber. What's new is that the candidate with the second highest number of votes becomes that constituency's MP in the secondary chamber, which here in the UK would replace the House of Lords. As a result, each constituency elects 2 different MPs, one in the primary chamber and one in the secondary chamber. FasPTP has many advantages. Firstly, it is simple to understand, simple to carry out, and it's particularly simple for voters because they vote in exactly the same way as they currently do under FPTP. Secondly, members of Parliament for both chambers are elected at the same time in a single nationwide general election. This single general election costs less than holding 2 sets of elections, which typically happens in other countries with 2 elected legislative chambers. Such countries include the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and many European nations. So, with FasPTP, you get the benefit of 2 elected chambers without doubling election costs. Thirdly, because each constituency elects 2 MPs, the number of constituencies can be halved without reducing the current ratio of MPs to voters. Not only does this reduce overcrowding in what is currently a packed House of Commons, but it also prevents parliamentary wage costs increasing significantly. This is because the overall number of MPs does not increase. Indeed, with lords and other nobles no longer attending the House of Lords and therefore no longer claiming parliamentary expenses, this voting system could actually save money for the taxpayer. Fourthly, an important advantage of FasPTP is that more constituents get an MP that they voted for, which is a significant aim of PR. Let's imagine an example. In a constituency at a general election, candidate A gets 40% of the votes, candidate B gets 25%, and the other candidates get the remaining 35%. In this example, under the current FPTP system, only candidate A becomes an MP, so 40% of voters get an MP they voted for, and 60% of voters do not. However, under FasPTP, both candidates A and B would become MPs, one in the primary chamber and the other in the secondary chamber. Therefore, 65% of voters in our example get an MP they voted for, and only 35% of voters do not. This increased representation isn't as large as under PR, but it's better than under the current FPTP system. There are, unfortunately, disadvantages to FasPTP. Electing members to both the primary and secondary chambers at the same time can create a significant break in the parliamentary process, with a loss of knowledge and skills as experienced MPs retire or fail to get re-elected. This is why many countries stagger the elections for each of their chambers in order to maintain political stability. Also, because the second chamber is elected, MPs in that chamber could be tempted to claim a mandate to interfere with the policies of the Prime Minister and the government in the primary chamber. However, this risk could be mitigated by copying how other countries with two elected chambers currently distribute rights, responsibilities and powers. Can you think of other advantages and disadvantages of FasPTP? Please feel free to add your ideas to this video's comments. So far in this video, I've considered story ideas centred on how the allocation of votes to select politicians could be changed. However, voting reform can also focus on the system of collecting votes. In the UK, this is a mix of remote postal voting used by some voters and voting in person at polling stations, which the majority of voters use. In private booths in polling stations, they mark an X on a sheet of paper next to their preferred candidate, fold up the sheet of paper, and then slip it into a supervised ballot box. In many other countries, however, voters use electronic voting systems, typically registering their vote on a tablet or a computer touchscreen. All these systems have advantages and disadvantages. For example, remote postal voting is ideal for those unable to leave the home, but many believe that it is too easily open to fraud. In-person voting with paper sheets and ballot boxes is harder to tamper with, but it uses a lot of paper and the count can be slow and labour-intensive. Meanwhile, electronic voting systems are automatic and quick, but the transmission of electronic data can be intercepted, threatening voter anonymity as well as the validity of the final results. Nevertheless, your story idea could focus on someone developing the ultimate voting system. Do they succeed, or is there no such thing as a perfect voting system? Will there always be a balance of advantages versus disadvantages? Thank you for watching this video. Please feel free to use any of these story ideas for your own novels, plays, screenplays and TV scripts. To see me ask more open-ended questions for story ideas about voting reform, please watch my follow-up video. Please also check out the rest of my YouTube channel, especially where I discuss the various books that I've written. I hope my channel encourages you to buy my books and to read them if you haven't already done so. Finally, please feel free to leave comments below and to like and subscribe this video and my YouTube channel. See you soon.